The harmattan wind had just begun to sweep through the village, carrying with it the dry dust from the north and the faint smell of smoke from farmers burning their fields in preparation for the next planting season. In Ottawoma, a place where red clay roads wound between mud brick houses with rusting tin roofs, everyone knew everyone's story, sometimes before the person themselves knew it. Aminata grew up here, the only daughter of Baba Sul, a respected cocoa farmer whose voice could silence a quarrel in the market square. Her mother, Mama Halima, was a quiet, soft-spoken woman who ran the household with an iron hand wrapped in velvet. The compound was alive every morning with the smell of pap bubbling on the fire, goats bleating from the pen, and roosters crowing like they owned the sun. Aminata was different from the other girls in the village. She was curious. While other girls were content to fetch water, pound yam, and prepare for marriage, Aminata would sit under the shade of the giant mango tree in the compound, reading old newspapers that traders used to wrap goods. Her father didn't like it. A girl who reads too much, he would say, will forget how to be a wife. But Mama Halima would smile and slip her extra bits of paper or an old book brought from the city. Baba Sul was strict, but not unkind in the eyes of the community. He believed in discipline the way the harmattan believed in dryness, harsh, unavoidable. His children feared him, and Aminata most of all, because she always seemed to be the one on the edge of breaking his rules. When Aminata turned 16, the family sent her to the nearby city of Ajir to live with her aunt and continue her schooling. It was the first time she left the village for more than a day. The city dazzled her, bustling streets filled with okadas weaving through traffic, market women calling out prices, and the air thick with the smell of fried plantain and exhaust fumes. But the city also introduced her to a world where her father's voice could not reach her. She met people who spoke about dreams bigger than marriage and farming. And then she met Say. Say was different from the boys she knew. He wore clean shirts that smelled faintly of cologne, spoke with the confidence of someone who believed the world owed him good things, and had a way of looking at her that made her heart pound like the village drums during festival season. He wasn't rich, but he had a charm that made poverty look like an adventure. Their relationship began in the most innocent way, helping her carry her books after class, sharing roasted corn on the roadside, laughing under streetlights when they should have been home. But as weeks turned into months, innocence melted into something deeper. They whispered promises about the future, about leaving the village life behind, about building a life where they could be free. When Aminata missed her period for the first time, she told herself it was stress from exams. When it happened again, she knew. The truth came crashing down on her like a sudden storm, and she was terrified, not of Say, but of her father. Say's reaction was not what she expected. "It will be fine," he said, avoiding her eyes. "You'll see. I'll take care of it." But he didn't explain how. In the weeks that followed, he grew distant, always busy, always promising to come but never staying long. When the bump on her belly became too obvious to hide, her aunt's whispers turned to sharp words. "You have shamed this family," her aunt spat one morning, her face twisted in anger. "Do you know what your father will say? Do you think he will welcome you back like this?" Aminata didn't answer. She knew the answer. Her father's pride was harder than the sun-baked clay of Ottawoma's roads. He had raised her to be an example, and now she was the example of failure. By the time word reached Ottawoma, it was carried not just by tongues, but by the speed of gossip that could outrun even the harmattan wind. Baba Sul didn't wait for Aminata to return on her own. He came to Ajir himself, riding in the back of a battered Peugeot 504, his eyes like the edges of a machete. The day he arrived was the day Aminata would never forget. She was sitting in her aunt's courtyard, peeling cassava, when the sound of his voice froze her blood. "Aminata," he called, and she felt like a small child again, caught stealing palm sugar. She stood slowly, her heart pounding. He didn't waste words. "Pack your things," he said. "Baba, please," she began, but he raised his hand, and the silence cut her off sharper than a slap. "You will not sleep under my roof again," he said, his voice trembling with fury. "You chose your path. Go and follow it. But you will not bring shame to me in this house." Her aunt stood by, saying nothing, her lips pressed tight. Aminata's hands shook as she packed her small bag, 2 dresses, a wrapper, and the old book her mother had given her. She wanted to scream, to explain, to tell him that she was scared and needed his help, but the words turned to stones in her throat. When she stepped into the street, the whole neighborhood seemed to be watching. Women leaned out of doorways. Children paused in their games, and old men shook their heads as if they had predicted this from the day she was born. Her father didn't look back at her as he climbed into the car. The door slammed, the engine coughed, and in moments he was gone, leaving her standing with her bag and the heavy weight of a future she couldn't yet imagine. That night, Aminata slept on the floor of a friend's room, staring at the ceiling and feeling the small flutter of life inside her. She thought about her mother, about the warm embrace she might have given if she had been there. But her mother was far away, bound by the chains of marriage and a husband whose word was law. Days turned into weeks. She found work in a small food stall, washing plates, and sometimes serving customers when the owner trusted her enough. The pay was barely enough for food, but it kept her alive. She stopped hearing from Say altogether. The last time she saw him, he was walking down the street with another girl, laughing, as if Aminata and the baby had been a dream he had woken from. The bitterness took root slowly. At first it was sorrow, then it turned to anger, not just at Say, but at her father. She told herself over and over that one day she would return, not broken, not begging, but standing tall enough to make him swallow his pride. And then the day came when she felt the first pangs of labor. The night Aminata went into labor, the city sky was heavy with rain clouds, though not a drop had yet fallen. The humid air pressed against her skin, and the smell of fried akra from a neighbor's stall mixed with the faint stench of the open gutter outside. She was in a small room she rented behind a row of corrugated metal shops, sitting on a low stool and peeling onions for the food vendor she worked for, when the first wave of pain gripped her belly. It wasn't like the mild cramps she had felt in the past weeks. This one made her drop the knife. She grabbed the edge of the stool, breathing hard. Another came moments later, sharper, deeper, and she knew this was it. Her friend Mariama, a seamstress who worked 2 shops down, heard her groan and rushed in. "Aminata, is it time?" Aminata nodded, unable to speak. Mariama didn't waste time. "Come, let's go. The midwife is still awake." She helped Aminata to her feet, and they began the slow, painful walk to the old midwife's place, weaving through narrow alleys lit by the dim glow of kerosene lamps. The midwife's name was Mama Fadik, a woman with deep laugh lines around her eyes and hands that had caught more babies than she could count. She led Aminata into the back room, a small space smelling of herbs, palm oil, and something metallic that reminded Aminata of blood. The labor was long and merciless. Sweat poured down her face, soaking her wrapper. She screamed until her throat was raw, clutching Mariama's hand so tightly that the other woman winced. Outside, the rain began to fall at last, drumming on the tin roof, drowning out her cries from the street. Hours passed in a blur of pain and exhaustion. And then suddenly, the first cry split the air, a thin, sharp wail that made tears spill down Aminata's cheeks. She barely had time to see the tiny, wrinkled face before another wave of agony seized her. "You are having another one," Mama Fadik exclaimed, surprised but calm. "Push again." Minutes later, a second cry joined the first. Twins. 2 tiny bundles wrapped in old but clean cloth, their fists clenched as if ready to fight the world. Aminata stared at them through the haze of exhaustion. One had a small dimple in the left cheek. The other's nose was broad and familiar, too familiar. Even in their newborn faces, she saw it. The unmistakable resemblance to Baba Sool. It was like the ancestors themselves had carved his features into their tiny bones. Mariama saw it too. She hesitated before saying, "Aminata, they look like—" "I know," Aminata whispered, her voice trembling. It wasn't Say's face she saw. It was her father's. The thought shook her to her core. For weeks she had blamed Say for leaving her, hated him for abandoning her when she needed him most. But now, holding her babies, she was forced to remember something she had buried deep, something from a night she wished had never happened. It was the night her father had visited Ajir months before she knew she was pregnant. He had come unexpectedly, claiming to check on her studies. But that night, after her aunt had gone to bed, he had been drinking palm wine. She remembered the smell on his breath, the strange, heavy look in his eyes. She had tried to push the memory away, to pretend it had been some nightmare, but here it was in flesh and blood, staring at her with tiny eyes. The shame and fury twisted inside her like a blade. She wanted to scream, to run, to throw the truth into the open so it could burn. But what would it change? In this world, in this city, a daughter's word against a father's was nothing. The weight of his respect in the village was heavier than her pain, so she kept quiet. Over the next weeks, Aminata learned that motherhood was both beautiful and brutal. She named the first boy Kofi, meaning born on Friday, and the second Tay, the first of twins in Yoruba tradition. They were small and often sickly, but their cries filled her tiny room with life. Money was tighter than ever. She strapped one baby to her back and the other to her chest as she worked at the food stall. The customers would sometimes coo over them, pressing coins into their tiny hands. But more often they stared too long, their eyes flicking from the babies' faces to hers, searching for gossip. One evening, Mariama asked, "Will you ever go back to the village?" Aminata shook her head. "Not yet. When I go back, it won't be as a girl they kicked out. I will go back with something to show." "What do you mean?" "I don't know yet," Aminata admitted, "but I will know when the time comes." Her resolve hardened over the next year. She saved every spare coin, sometimes skipping meals so the twins could eat. She learned to sew from Mariama, taking small jobs mending clothes. She started selling Puff Puff on weekends to market women. Slowly, she built a small savings. But raising twins in the city, without family, was like walking through fire every day. When they fell sick, she had to borrow money for medicine. When her rent increased, she nearly lost a room. She thought often about her mother, wondering if she even knew the truth, or if Baba Sul had told her some story to explain Aminata's disappearance. And then came the letter. It arrived in the hands of a trader from Adawoma, who sometimes passed through Ajir. The envelope was thin, the handwriting shaky but familiar. It was from her mother. "Aminata, my daughter," it began, "I have not seen you in many seasons. My heart aches every day. Your father does not speak your name, but I pray for you. I do not know if I will still be alive when you return, but if you can, come before the Yam Festival. I want to see your face again." Aminata read the letter over and over, her tears falling on the page. Her mother's words were a soft voice in the storm, pulling her toward home. She began to imagine it, walking back into Adawoma, holding Kofi and Tay by the hand. Let them see the children who carried Baba Sul's very face. Let them whisper. Let the truth hang in the air where even the ancestors could not ignore it. The thought gave her a strange kind of power. When the Yam Festival drew near, she packed her few belongings and dressed the twins in their cleanest clothes. Mariama hugged her tightly. "Are you sure?" "Yes," Aminata said. "It's time." The journey to Adawoma took most of the day. The bus rattled over potholes, passing fields of cassava and maize, clusters of goats, and small boys waving from the roadside. The closer they came to the village, the more her heart pounded. When she stepped off the bus, the sun was sinking low, painting the sky in gold and orange. The air smelled with smoke and fresh yam. The twins clung to her hands, their eyes wide. The first person to see her was an old neighbor, Mama Cootie, who dropped a bundle of firewood she was carrying. "Aminata," she gasped. Her eyes went to the boys, and her mouth fell open. Within minutes, the news was running to the village like dry grass on fire. People came from their compounds, pretending to pass by but staring openly. And then from across the compound, she saw him, Baba Sul, standing tall, his face as unreadable as the stone statues by the shrine. His eyes went from her to the twins, lingering there a heartbeat too long. For the first time since that terrible night, Aminata did not look away. The heavy rains had passed, leaving the village soaked and glistening under the clear morning sun. Aminata stood behind her small fabric stall, her hands carefully folding a vibrant Kent cloth as the familiar voices of the market drifted around her. The twins, Kofi and Tay, played nearby with other children, their laughter mingling with the calls of traders hawking their goods. But today, the calm was shattered by a shadow from the past. Say stood at the edge of the market, his presence like an unwelcome breeze that stirred the dust. His eyes, once bright with youthful charm, now bore the weight of regret and uncertainty. He approached cautiously, avoiding the curious gazes of the market women and the whispered comments from the onlookers. "Amanana," he called softly, his voice barely carrying over the hum of the market. She looked up, heart tightening, but her face remained composed. The years of pain and betrayal had carved a protective shell around her. "Say," she said, her tone neutral, "what brings you here?" "I heard about the twins," he said, stepping closer, eyes flicking to the boys playing nearby. I wanted to see them." Aminata's jaw clenched. "Why now?" He swallowed hard. "I was a coward. I'm sorry. I thought I could fix things, but I failed you." The twins stopped playing and ran toward them, pulling at Aminata's skirt. Kofi reached out a small hand to Sei, who hesitated before kneeling to meet their eyes. Aminata watched, a mixture of anger and pity swirling inside her. "They don't need you," she said quietly. "They have me." Sei looked away, ashamed. "I want to help," he insisted, "for their sake." But Aminata shook her head. "Help won't undo the years lost. If you truly want to help, start by earning our trust." Sei nodded slowly, knowing this was just the beginning of a long road. Life in the village continued to weave itself around Aminata and her children. Her business grew steadily, and the fabric she sold became sought after, bringing a modest prosperity she had only dreamed of during her darkest days. Still, Baba Sul remained distant, the wound between father and daughter deep and unhealed. The village elders watched quietly, occasionally offering counsel to Baba Sul, but his pride held firm like the ancient baobab tree at the village center. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in hues of orange and crimson, Baba Sul sat alone on the veranda of his compound. His eyes, usually so hard, were softened by memory and regret. Mama Halima approached quietly, carrying a steaming cup of hibiscus tea. "Your daughter is strong," she said softly. "Stronger than we gave her credit for." He took the cup, his hands trembling slightly. "She carries my blood," he said, "and yet I failed her." "You can still make things right," Mama Halima urged. "Pride has cost you more than you realize." Baba Sul sighed deeply, the weight of years pressing down. "I will think on it," he said. The twins turned 3, their personalities blossoming like the flowers in the village gardens. Kofi was curious and adventurous, always climbing trees and asking endless questions. Tay was quieter, thoughtful, with a smile that could soften even the sternest face. Aminata watched them with pride and hope, determined to give them a future far different from her own. Yet, the shadow of their grandfather's rejection lingered. One day, Baba Sul came to her stall unannounced. The market fell silent as the man, who had once cast her out, stood humbly before her. "Aminata," he began, voice rough with emotion. "I have been proud, stubborn. I see now what I have lost." She looked at him, guarded. "I want to know my grandsons," he said, reaching out a hand that trembled. Tears welled in Aminata's eyes. "It will take time," she whispered. With Baba Sul's slow but steady return, the village began to heal old wounds. He spent afternoons teaching Kofi and Tay about the land, the cocoa trees, and the traditions of their people. Aminata found peace in these moments, watching the boys bond with their grandfather, seeing the once cold man soften into a grandfather's warmth. Yet, life was not without struggle. The rains failed one year, and the cocoa crop withered. Aminata's business suffered as families tightened their belts. During these harsh times, the community came together, sharing what little they had. Aminata learned that love and hope could flourish even in hardship. Years passed. Kofi and Tay entered school, their laughter filling the classrooms of Adawoma. Aminata's business expanded, and she became a respected woman in the village, known not just for her fabrics, but for her resilience and kindness. Baba Sul, now an old man, often sat by the mango tree, telling stories of the ancestors, passing wisdom to the young. One evening, under a sky strewn with stars, Aminata sat beside him. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" he asked. "For forgiving me. For giving us a place in your heart." He smiled, a gentle smile that held the promise of new beginnings. The village gathered for the annual Harvest Festival, a celebration of life, resilience, and community. Drums beat steadily, dancers twirled in colorful garments, and the aroma of spiced meat and freshly baked bread filled the air. Aminata stood with her family, her mother beside her, the twins grown into young men strong and proud, and Baba Sul leaning on his walking stick, but with eyes shining bright. As the sun set, the village elder called for a toast. "To Aminata," he proclaimed, "who returned not broken, but stronger, who brought new life and healed old wounds." Cheers erupted, hands clapped, and hearts swelled. Aminata looked at her twins, men who bore their grandfather's face, but also their mother's strength. She smiled, knowing that love, no matter how hard fought, always finds a way home.